Good.
Welcome. I'm Emily Soccorsy, and this is Justin Foster.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. This is one of those webinars where when you create the deck, your own anticipation builds to share some of the things. And so I'm just excited, personally excited to and enthusiastic to share some of these thoughts with you that we have crafted. So.
Yeah. And just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So if you have questions throughout, you can feel free to type them into the chat bar or into the questions. Either one will work. We'll be monitoring both. And if you hear something that you like and you want to share with the world, we definitely encourage you to do that, either on Twitter or Instagram. If you see something cool, feel free to share. But we do always appreciate the shout out. So we are at Root and River. So you can find us that way on Instagram or on Twitter. And this is a very interactive webinar. We always like to be interactive and ask TPQs, as we call them, thought-provoking questions. So we will be having a couple questions that we will ask you, and then in the end we'll be having some discussion around some of the topics that we're going to introduce today. And really with everything that we do, it's an invitation to sort of dive into some new ideas and to wrestle with some of these well, we always like to disrupt, don't we? And so we're going to put out some disruptive ideas. So we like to wrestle with those and get your questions and feedback along at the end and have some good discussion. So I think that's it.
And if you're in the hashtagging mood, we do have a hashtag for this for Twitter or Instagram. Your calling is your brand. Hashtag your calling is your brand.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right. So without further ado, we'll get started.
So we always, when we do a workshop or one of our root sessions, a coaching session, we always like to set the intention. I think this is probably a practice that you knew before I did, before I took up yoga last year. But
Yep.
it's really grounding and it makes you much more present when you set the intention. So our intention for today is that you would listen to, each of you that are participating would listen to the voice that's in your heart. That sounds a bit esoteric, but once you understand some of the things that we're going to share with you about what that voice is saying, maybe it'll make a little bit more sense.
Great. So, starting off, one of our core beliefs is that your calling is your brand. So what that means is that voice that you hear deep inside your heart telling you that you need to pursue this passion that's sort of burning away in the center of you. That's what we would call your calling. And that fire, that idea, really becomes your brand. And so brands are no longer manufactured reality like they were in the Mad Men age. They are your juicy center. And so we have a poll question for you that I'm going to launch here to get your take on that. And here you go. So tune in to this and give us your opinion.
And while you ponder this, ponder the times that when you have heard this nudge or this pull or a push. Jacob Nordby, who was one of our friends who wrote two great books, Divine Arsonists and The Blessings of the Weird, talks about the nudge. That sometimes it's not a calling, sometimes it's a push. But think about the times that you have ignored it and then how you felt. You can almost reverse engineer calling. And so ponder those.
Cool.
Thank you all for who are
voting. So 63% of you. Thank you.
That's right.
The power of big data. So how many of you believe you have a calling? Let's look at the results. So pretty overwhelming. Yes, 100%. Sometimes. I like the 20% sometimes. And we sort of, that wasn't totally tongue-in-cheek. We feel like sometimes callings come and go inside of us in a way, or they become more intense. They become more pronounced. 5 years ago, I would have told you that I never wanted to own my own company and that I would never really think of going out on my own. But here I am, here I sit. these years later doing both of those things. So great. Well, because you feel like you have a calling, or sometimes have a calling, you're in the right place. And we're going to talk more about that.
And a question for you to ponder for yourself, and if you feel inspired to share, you can put it in the chat box, is, so if you said yes, what are you called to do? It could be related to some sort of mission, nonprofit, a business idea, a passion that you've had your whole life. Mm-hmm. But what are you called to do? And feel free to share, but it's good to write that down as a reminder when fear, uncertainty, and doubt creep in.
Right. And just the practice of thinking about, gosh, what am I called to do in words will get you maybe a little bit more focused. So, all right, so calling. All right. So you will know it's your calling when, right? So how do we know if it is a calling? So we have these three things that can act as a little bit of a filter or a guide. So if it's something that has been burning in you for a long time, it's sort of a lifelong passion. So for me, since the time I was a kid, Justin, I've always been like a writer and an articulator of emotions, putting emotions into words, whether it was poetry or whether it was writing plays as a kid and forcing all my friends and my family to perform them. This is a lifelong passion of mine. It may not be exactly, maybe if you have that lifelong passion from childhood, it might not be articulated in exactly the way that you had it as a kid, but it feels like the same thread. So that's the first one.
Yeah, and the idea of passion too is it may not be a surface passion or what we mean by surface, or a manifested passion. It may be more of a quiet knowing that you have. And so for me, it's basically liberty or freedom. That's always been in me ever since my earliest memories of being 2.5 or 3 years old is this yearning for freedom and liberty. And that then drove me to eventually, in my early 30s, to become an entrepreneur. So that's an example. It's not always a tangible like art or music or writing. Sometimes it's almost like a spiritual passion that you have.
So you can't wait to express it, though. That's the second thing, that you really can't wait to share that with other people. And then finally, when others experience it, there's some kind of value creation. So what do we mean by that? We mean that when others kind of come in contact in whatever form that passion or that calling is manifested, they're like, oh, I need more of that. I want that. They're expressing their desire to have a piece of that. So maybe that looks like, hey, if you're kind of, your passion is let's say foodie, you're a foodie on the side, but that's kind of been percolating away in you. And people are always coming to you asking for restaurant recommendations, or maybe they're even saying, hey, would you go to this place with me and tell me what you think? Or have you written anything about this place? So they're asking for more of that calling, that passion that you have.
And part of that is that no one really cares about your brand. That's the name of our podcast that we're launching, a couple episodes on our website. They really don't care until they do. But most people that need something from you are not waiting to experience it as a brand or an offering. Unless you have some sort of game-changing, groundbreaking, cure for the common cold type idea. But many, many more people will care about your calling because it comes from a much, much deeper place in the human experience than just sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs type stuff. And that's why we say your brand is not really what your offering is. Your brand is how other people experience what you believe. And the tendency that we have is to be very linear. This is what I do, which is a task-oriented mindset, and this is what I offer, which is a product-oriented mindset. Doing and offering are important things, but deeper than that is being and becoming. So you know what you believe in, and when you invite people to share in your calling, you're inviting them to a much bigger conversation, a much richer conversation than a product offering.
All right. So from your calling springs your message. So first you have a calling, and then you have to articulate that in some way, and that articulation is your message. So it's a feeling, and then it's translated into words. And this can be tricky, and this can get, it tends to be just what people focus on a lot of the time, right? They kind of like skip over really thinking too much about the calling and kind of go with the flow and
Hmm.
on the feeling of it, and then they're obsessing over a message, and typically that means some
Yeah,
cheesy like
slogan.
tagline
Right,
or
right.
slogan, right?
And everyone's in the search of the mythical unicorn of elevator pitch.
Right.
Well, first of all, you're not going to have that many conversations in elevators.
That's true. Everyone's talking
It
about
should be
elevator
an
pitch.
airplane seat pitch.
Yeah, it should be an airplane seat pitch or a like casual coffee shop. It should be
Yeah,
called
something.
coffee shop pitch.
It should be something like
I think
that.
we need to rename that. In any case,
In any
nobody
case,
talks in elevators.
right. And nobody, and this idea that your message, this is a big issue that you have to, that we think people need to break, is the mythology that if you just say just the right thing at an intellectual level, they'll get it and they'll like you.
Right.
And
Right.
we're all,
No.
as humans, we're at war between freedom and acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be free to share our calling, but then we want to be accepted as well. So as we continue, the thing to keep in mind is that all messages are actually a piece of art that you're expressing to the world. And as you express to the world, it's being, when you use the right language and when you speak from the soul or speak from the heart, then language becomes art. And that's the difference between really, like, for example, really good writing and sort of pablum, sort of low nutritional value writing is an example of that, or the difference between an inspirational speaker and a motivational speaker. An inspirational speaker is, Marcus Luttrell, lone survivor, Navy SEAL. A motivational speaker is someone that has words that stir you up, but then they go away when you leave. So here's how you will know it's a message.
Know it's a message when, like we already talked about, it's not a slogan. So there's some real depth to it. There's some heart to it, and every time you say it, it doesn't feel like a slogan. It feels so organic. It just feels like an articulation of your heart or your passion. Also, it starts conversations, so it withstands conversation, any conversation. But I think what we really mean there is that it it doesn't end a conversation; it begins a conversation, and then it can be discussed for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think the thing then is then an extended conversation, so it lasts a lifetime and beyond. And an example would be the message of Disney has far outlived Walt Disney. The message of Henry Ford has far outlived Henry Ford. But my favorite example, it's from a book called Small Giants, is about a brewery in Germany that's about 600 and some years old. And they have the same message in German written on the wall of the brewery, which says, "Make great beer." And that's a message that is a very simple, from the heart example of something that lasts a lifetime and beyond.
Beer.
Beer.
It's powerful.
Yes. So this idea of message then is, it's really an invitation. And when you have that invitation,
Well, it's an invitation basically to attract people to you, but it's also an invitation for people to be repelled. So I talk about this a lot, that branding is actually, everyone wants to attract this huge audience. But actually, branding is a lot more about repulsion than it is, or repelling than it is about attraction in many cases. And I think it's very helpful for you to think about it in that light. So the idea here is that when you know your calling and you can articulate that into a message, that message will repel the people who do not believe what you believe, and it moves them out of your way. It gets them off of your path.
mm-hmm.
I think most professionals have been in a situation where maybe you're working with a client or working on a project, and it just doesn't stop. Like there's conflict from the beginning, or it gets off on the wrong foot, and then that relationship or that client becomes something that is constantly draining your energy and maybe diminishing your value, trying to nickel and dime, and it's a huge hindrance. So in a perfect world, we can repel those energy suck people or clients or situations in a very rapid way. So we can repel the people who are a waste of our time and attract the opportunities or clients that are not a waste of our time in a really high value relationship.
I think the other thing too, especially if those of you that are listening in are have a side gig or the thing where you have your daytime job and you're thinking about doing something else, that you build your career by saying yes.
Mm-hmm.
You build your brand by saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at Southwest Airlines and their great discipline to stay no frills. Or you look at the New England Patriots and their great discipline to not oversign expensive free agents or reach for draft picks that don't fit the culture. And so when you do that, you are able to then establish value, which we're going to dig into in a little bit.
So the difference between passion and enthusiasm. We understand that there's a lot of soul searching when it comes to having a calling, and sort of pursuing that. And a lot of times we're just wondering, is this going to kind of go away, or will this stay?
Right. And so passion is the thing that we said that is the lifelong thing that you've had, and it really doesn't go away. It may ebb and flow. So think of this as a formula. Passion produces action. But what we often mistake is that passion and enthusiasm are the same thing. And if you're an entrepreneur, you'll know that the passion may always be at a slow burn, but man, the enthusiasm comes and goes, like weather changes in Austin. And here, so the formula is this: passion produces action, but action produces enthusiasm. A great example of this, just at a practical level, is when you don't feel like going to the gym, and you go anyway, even though if you're not enthused, and then when you're done, you're like, oh, that was great, or I'm glad I did that. Mm-hmm. And that's the sort of anecdotal evidence that you need to protect your passion or nurture your passion, but let the enthusiasm ebb and flow. Now, if you go into the long doldrums, and because being an entrepreneur is hell on your heart mm-hmm. and your mind, and so if you get into the doldrums or depression or anxiety start to trigger, that can seep in and cause you to lose your passion, but that's a self-care issue. It's not really a direct branding issue.
Well, I think it can seep in and cause you to lose your enthusiasm, certainly, right. And maybe erode a bit of the passion. But I think enthusiasm is always the first to go.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So we actually have another poll. So if you're just listening in and not looking at your screen, you're going to want to tune in here so you can answer our poll. So how close is your current career to your calling? Is the question that we'd like to ask you.
And some context to the answers, because these are always subjective, mm-hmm. is my career is my calling means that you're pretty well lined up mm-hmm. and you're doing what you feel like you were born to do. And it might be. We go through stages like that. I didn't really know that branding was my calling until maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Or maybe you're in a place that it's just a job, but your calling is your side project, and that's completely okay. Mm-hmm. It's just the awareness that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. All right. So thank you. I'm going to close out the poll and we'll take a look at the results together. Yay! So
majority.
57% say my career is my calling. 14% say my career might be my calling. Still trying to figure that one out. And then 29% say it's just a job. My calling is my side project.
And that's okay too.
Yeah, and as Justin said, that's definitely a great place to be because you've got regular income, and then you've found a way to balance that with pursuing the passion.
We have a couple clients that are in day jobs that through using their PTO and evenings, they are pursuing their calling. And one of them is a very high-level executive in a company that she just has decided that it's time for her to pursue her calling, and so she's putting the work in while still performing, her duties at the job, and that's completely okay.
And by career, we really mean the job that you're in now. It might not be your career; it might just be what you're pursuing currently.
Exactly.
We said that a little bit earlier. So. Your calling is the root of your brand. I think we talked about that in the very beginning, that really the calling is the place where you return to when you feel maybe a little dip in enthusiasm, that has to be at the root of your brand. Mm-hmm. And your beliefs are the first growth from this root. So as you begin to define your brand a little bit more clearly, we think organically that you see you begin to look at the bedrock of your calling, the things that are at the foundation of what you're doing. So for us, truth, beauty, defiance, value, and
respect.
No,
I can't remember either.
no.
That's all right.
It'll come back to me. Sovereignty.
Sovereignty, yeah.
Yeah. So those are our core beliefs as an organization and as people, and we build everything that we do really off of that. In fact, we were preparing this deck, and we actually didn't have any drawings in it, any art in it, and one of our core beliefs is beauty, and our mantra for that is always add beauty, and I just couldn't let it rest. We had to go back and add some art. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it seems beautiful to you. But that these are not in name only. They're actually things that you use every day to define what you do, how you serve your clients, and your own standards.
So a couple things about this just to add additional flavor, and then we have an open question for you that you can answer yourself or you can share as well. And first is to understand what we mean by beliefs. And there really are two kinds of beliefs. There are systemic beliefs and intrinsic beliefs. Systemic beliefs are beliefs that you're taught. Family values, religious beliefs, political beliefs, they're sort of given to you by society and the way you're raised. And many of those are great and fine, but intrinsic beliefs are beliefs that you've discovered for yourself. And it's very difficult to build a brand on systemic beliefs because they will come and go based off of conditions, or they kind of suck the joy out of a brand because it doesn't have the same mission and calling and purpose to it. Intrinsic beliefs are the things that you've always known, and therefore they're the true evidence of that your brand is your calling. So our open question to you, actually we have two for you to consider, which is, what's a belief, just one belief you've always known? Think back to being a child and you were not taught this. You just experienced through your own discovery, you discovered this belief. And then today, in your current life, how is this belief manifested in your daily habits? And so one of the things that we teach in our root sessions and in our Becoming a Brand virtual course is that there's a direct line between beliefs, behavior, and brand. And going back to what we said, that your brand is how other people experience what you believe. And so understanding the growth from root to the little seedling to the first fruit of your brand is in your behavior. And when you make that linkage, you'll understand how much power you have over how people perceive what your brand is.
So I typed those questions into the chat window so you could see them, or jot them down if you wanted to spend some time on them later. All right. So moving on. And the whole point of this is really, so to sell your truth, to create value in the world, you must first tell the truth that you have inside of you. And so that's really important, getting clear on what that truth is first and foremost, and then creating value.
Right, and this goes to being a very common human trait, especially with entrepreneurs, especially with creative entrepreneurs, is this this unease with selling your wares, as it were. Most creatives are not very good at selling, and that's okay. And what you're doing is you just go tell the truth, and the right people will be drawn to you, especially if you have some effective packaging around it, and then you get a following, and then it converts to value, and you live happily ever after. So.
All right, and basically when you do this and when you share your truth, we want it to inspire, you want it to inspire three things. So relationships. Again, people kind of coming to you, seeking you out for that either service or insight or product that you're providing. We also wanted to produce additional content. So we talk a lot about relationships, content, and experiences in our work. So all people who have a calling or a brand really need to be producing some kind of content in today's marketplace. And then we want it, once you share that, it should create conversations, likes, shares, and we don't mean this strictly in the sense of social media, but just, hey, I saw that post, a literal conversation, and then people also forwarding that onto their friends, their family. Also, it should create an experience. So what I mean here is that the experience of coming into contact with you and your calling and your beliefs, it becomes very memorable. It becomes something special. Or if it's, we like to give whenever we're facilitating or working with clients, we give gifts, because it's just, that's how I was brought up by my mother. Shout out to Judy. But also because we are trying to create a special experience that is very heart-driven. It's not a gimmick, of working with us and being in our orbit. We want to spread some kindness and good in the world, and we think that's a good way to do it. So that's an example.
Yeah, and if you're a startup entrepreneur, your idea, whatever your idea is not really your brand. Your brand is you, and so this is where self-confidence and self-worth come in as an entrepreneur. We had a person that we met with that is considering hiring us to help her with her brand, and one of the things, she's a startup entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur in the educational space, and we presented to her this rather bold idea that she needed to brand herself first. No idea is greater than the person that brought it. You are the messenger, the carrier of this idea, and so you need to, in my very declarative way, you need to understand that really when we're talking about brand, we're talking about the relationships you have, your circles of influence, the way people interact with you, and the experiences people have with you. And to me, the holy grail of this is someone like Richard Branson, who his corporate brand, Virgin, stellar, but his personal brand as a thought leader, a philanthropist, a CEO, is it all perfectly in line with that. And he's not afraid to talk about the mess too, and some of the things he's dealt with.
Another one, I mean, it's very overused, but Oprah is exactly the same way.
I mean, too.
Her brand is amazing and consistent across all of her ventures. So, all right. So let's talk about value. Value creation. We're capitalists, and we think that you probably want to extract the highest value for your passion and calling. So your brand must create value in the world. And how does it do that? So it solves an unspoken or unmet need or a pain. A lot of marketing jargon talks about understanding your client's pain, and that can get a little, drone-ish when you hear that over and over. But if you think about it in terms of an unmet need that exists in among the people who you believe would find value in what you're presenting. So Uber, we use the Uber example quite a bit. The unmet need was that people needed to get around, but they hated taxis. And then there was also this excess resource of tons of people out there with cars that are sitting in their driveways or garages and a lot of time on their hands. So when those two things met, Uber is born. There's lots of other apps that work in that same model.
Right. We call that, and we actually break this down in our root sessions, the innovation scene. And it's really evidence, when we talk about value, it's really IP. Maybe not always legally protectable IP, other than a trademark, but IP in the sense that
intellectual property.
Thank you. It's in the sense intellectual property in the sense that it came from you and it's presented to the world. Music, for example, music is intellectual property. Literally, it's the same notes, just being rearranged in a different way. Unless you're Milli Vanilli, then or Ice-T. What was his name? Vanilla Ice. Yeah. Not much IP there.
Now he's done pretty well.
Is that right? I don't pay attention to his career, but it's odd that you do.
No, I don't. But I noticed that he has a show. He does like renovations on some HGTV or something. Yeah.
That's shocking.
I had a friend. No, it wasn't a friend. An acquaintance that watched it all the time.
Anyway. I see. So
nice little tangent alert for you there. Another way to create value is that, well, first of all, it comes with very simple directions. So you don't want to have to create this long winding path for your audience that you've attracted to you with your calling. You don't want to have them travel this long path in order to understand what the value is or to get to it. So we don't want the IKEA assembly directions here. You need to create a very simple, direct invitation for them to purchase or to engage in the value of what you're offering. It's a warm personal invitation, but it's very direct. So this translates into calls to action on your website or in person. So that coffee house speech, not your elevator speech, should end with some kind of value invitation that's clear, direct, and concise. A lot of times what we see is that the audience is already there and they may even be asking for what you have, but you haven't figured out how to give it, how to assign the value to it. So, you know, people ask us what we do and we explain that all brands begin in the root, and the root is the heart of that person, and that becomes the soul of the brand. And the way that we present that as value is that we have a Becoming a Brand course, we offer root sessions, and we do brand coaching for people.
And an example of simple directions too, and as it relates to creating value, is developing some sort of minimum viable product. So this is true if you have a side gig. Sometimes your minimum viable product, maybe you're an artist and you want to sell some of your art. Well, your minimum viable product is maybe Etsy or Instagram, or maybe some sort of just easy way to access you and buy your stuff is a minimum viable product. The other thing that we do that's around simple directions is, for us, is you can discuss all of the fears that someone may be having about an idea or a situation. And for one is, people are terrified or often voice that they're scared that when they work with us, they're not going to find their message. And we reassure them with some simple directions that the message is already in you. We're just anthropologists digging for it. So
absolutely. All right, and you want to create that I want that moment. To create desire in the mind of your audience, your offer needs to have inherent value and an opportunity to add value to it. So how will you make your calling your brand? So this is where we get into those 3 steps. We're going to walk you through it. So step 1, do some deep work. Probably not what you want to hear.
But you got to go inward. It doesn't matter what's out there until you know what's in here. And I'm pointing to myself. So what's inside of you is your brand. And we were at we did a retreat for a team branding event yesterday in Sacramento, and we talked a lot about introspection. And one of the guys, I was really impressed with him, says, you know, I don't spend enough time thinking about what I'm feeling and what's on the inside of me, and I'm going to go do that. Because he wanted to be a better leader, because that was part of their goals for the team brand that they were building. So deep work means introspection, contemplation, sitting quietly and thinking about some things.
Right. So we have some questions to help you get there.
And this is being recorded, and it'll be shared out to you, so you don't have to mad scramble here.
Or take a screenshot. You can always take a screenshot.
You can always take a screenshot.
Definitely go for it. So do I have a passion for my calling, or am I just enthusiastic about an idea? So spending some time with that one. Do I see this project as a calling at all, or is it an idea to get rich or get out of a bad situation, like the job I hate? And am I willing to double down on my investment, mind, money, and time to make it work?
And I would just add to the third one, are you willing to double down on your beliefs? Are you willing to double down on some faith?
That's a good point.
Are you willing to double down on some rebellion? So many of us that are called to be entrepreneurs are pulled by the false security of a job. Being an entrepreneur is actually just factually much more secure. It's like the study that shows that you have a much higher likelihood of getting killed in a car accident than killed by a shark. Yet people are more scared of sharks than car accidents.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So it's all in the head. And so when you double down on faith, or you double down on conviction, you're going deeper into you to stay rooted in this calling that has sprung forth from your soul. And it doesn't make you unstoppable, but it does make you unbreakable as you move forward.
But there will be a lot of opportunities for breaking. My husband said this quote to me yesterday, and I think it's perfect here. Don't dig up and doubt what you have planted in faith. So you want to make sure that what you're planting is going to have a great root system, and that you're ready to bear the droughts and the carnivorous beetles or something that will attack it. Obviously, I do not have an agricultural background. So moving right along. Um, so here are some more deep questions. What am I most afraid of? What current habits or views will impede success? And whose approval do I need to be considered a success? Like we're all living in the world with other people whom we tend to, look to or maybe even judge ourselves against. And let's just get honest about whose approval is really going to matter to us. And maybe as you're writing about this or thinking about this, there may be some people that you think, I used to really care and now I don't anymore.
Yeah.
But it's important to know that.
When you express your fears, they shrink every time. And you'll learn that 99% of your fears aren't real. And the 1% that is real, that is an actual fear, you can take action on. And the other thing is that it's that self-examination of your own habits that would have an impact on how other people see you or perceive your value. So an example of that for me, just to be transparent, was I was a very insecure, and still am at times, entrepreneur. And I've had a number of mentors point out to me that insecurity, I tried to cover it up with brashness, as it were. And so my habit was to be sort of overly aggressive in a business development or a deal situation, and it actually impeded success. When I just let go and I expressed my value and related to them as a human being, my close ratio of deals went way up. So we encourage this deep work because it's manifested in the second area that we're going to go to, which is getting your mediums or your platforms up to code. So this is a common thing, and we understand why, but it's the entrepreneur or the entrepreneurial habit of putting tactics in front of strategy. And yes, you need these tactical things we're going to talk about, but they will spring from all the work that we've talked about, that your calling, your message, your beliefs, all of that will come and be shown on through these mediums.
Yeah. So are all of these ready to express your brand and your message? Are they a waiting platform? So your website, your social media sites, your blog where you share your ideas, your marketing collateral, and then templates, which would mean your letterhead, your deck, the way that everything that you're putting out to the world is designed.
And a very specific example is on our website. If you go to rootenriver.com at some point, you will see that there's the way that we have the hero image across the top, and then some of the basic language or the introductory language we have. One of them is that we say that branding is first a spiritual exercise. And we have a number of people saying, well, are you worried you're going to offend someone or leave someone out? And we're like, yeah, well, we're not worried about that. That would be okay.
That would be fine. Again, it's a repulsion.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, the ways to do this is, one just quick little thing is to, update your profile picture if it hasn't been updated in a while. Add that new language about your calling or your brand to your website or to your social media. Social is a great place to kind of begin to share this stuff with the world. Think a little bit more deeply about what kind of content you are creating. If you do have a blog, maybe set up an editorial calendar for yourself, and that can be easy as writing out the weeks, the dates, and just kind of coming up with an idea that is rooted in that calling or rooted in one of your beliefs to share that week. And as far as marketing collateral and templates, I mean, design is part of the expression of your calling. So don't skimp on it. Try to find somebody local or somebody that you know that is a professional that can help you really create a visual aspect to your brand.
Right. The last thing to do here is crowdsource this. And you're looking at the first 3 to 6 seconds. So you can ask a circle of friends whose opinions you trust and ask them to do basically a mini brand audit and talk about first impressions. And you can ask questions like, in the first 3 to 6 seconds, what did you notice? How did you feel? What are the first impressions that you had? You'll get a ton of data there about where you're at in getting step 2, which is getting your mediums up to code.
All right, so let's go to step 3. Planning your brand launch. Bum, ba, da, da. All right, so we put together 5 steps of an effective brand launch plan for you. So again, to Justin's point, strategy first, tactics second. number one, create a tangible vision of success. So we ask our clients a lot to go to the deeper part of your brain, the oldest part of your brain, which is the visual and emotional center. And if you can, relax and create that vision in your mind of what success in this endeavor looks like, and draw it, write it down, but have that tangible vision of success in mind.
And the second one is you have to set an intention with a time frame. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions, so is the road to failure. And so it needs to have a time frame. And it's a very simple what by when. Sometimes it's called commander's intent. A very common example of commander's intent is when JFK said we're going to put a man on the moon in this decade. That's a what by when. That everybody, that from engineers to astronauts to the guy sweeping the floor, knew the intention within a time frame. And when you set the intention and then you put a time frame to it, you're essentially appealing to both sides of your brain, the left and the right brain.
And then what we suggest that you do is create a top 3 goals. Don't make a list of 30 things you have to do, please, because it's just overwhelming and it defeats the purpose. So the top 3 things you're going to do next, and these need to be measurable, actionable, and realistic. I'm going to get up to 100 followers. I'm going to update my social media profile and put a realistic time frame on it. One of these things shouldn't be like
10,000 followers in the next 2 months. Then what you're going to do is you'll be one of those people that buys followers, and nobody likes that.
Oh no, don't do that.
Nobody
please.
likes those people.
Please don't do that.
The other thing about goals is they should stretch you a little bit, but they should be, like we said, they should be achievable.
All right, and then develop an offering that is easy for people to buy. So this goes to my earlier Don't Be the IKEA instruction booklet, and Justin talking about the MVP, or minimum viable product. What's something that you could offer right away that is very simple for you to sell and easy for people to buy? Determine what that is, and then begin talking about your calling, and make that kind of the TARP statement, as we like to say, about what you are driven to do, what you're driven to share. Right,
and so being an artist, and we're all artists at something, being an artist is, in theory only, is knowing how to paint or how to sing or how to write or how to do woodworking, and never putting that out into the world so that it can be converted to value like we talked about. It's probably for many creatives in particular, or side people with side gigs, it's the scariest piece, which is, well, what if they don't like me? Well, rejection, just like fear, is part of the entrepreneurial lifestyle. So is rejection.
Yeah, people aren't going to like you all the time. Not everyone likes us all the time. All right.
So the last thing here in your 5 steps of an effective brand launch plan is to commit to the next 5 actions to take. Now, actions are things that you have direct accountability and responsibility for, and they should be aligned with your vision, your intention with the time frame, your top 3 goals, and your offering. So maybe one of the action items is get my website up to code, and then you put a date that you want it done by. So that's not really a goal; it's more of an action item. Maybe your goal, just to put it all together, your goal is that you would increase the number of inbound leads from your website by 20%. Well, that's a goal. The action is you better have a website that attracts people to you so you can do that.
And that shares your message.
And it's a little bit like, think of the metaphor here of chopping wood. You can only chop one log at a time, or split one log at a time. And so it doesn't matter what the other 15 or 20 or 30 or 50 things to do. You will always have plenty of things to do. It's honing in and giving your energy and attention to the next 5 things. Knock those out with a high level of excellence and go to the next 5 and the next 5.
Right.
And once this becomes a habit, what you'll be able to do is almost have 2 lists of actions. You have your next 5 actions, and then you have the up to bat or at bat list or on deck list of things that you might do next, but you re-examine it. And when you do this, you'll start to go back. This goes back to passion, action, and enthusiasm. When you have a passion for something and you begin to commit action, it produces enthusiasm. Imagine getting some feedback from a customer or a friend or an influencer, like, hey, I saw your your new, I saw your new website, it looks beautiful, or I read one of your blog posts and it really spoke to me. When you put it out there, it will create value in the world as long as you do it consistently.
All right, so that takes us to discussion time.
Mm-hmm.
There should be a little.
Yeah, we need some music,
We need a jingle. We'll get that next time. Sorry, guys. So, what did you learn that you're most excited to implement? I see that some people responded to our earlier questions. We're just rolling. We didn't necessarily open them up at that time. But this is open time for discussion. So go ahead and type in questions. What did you learn today in the webinar that you're most excited to implement? Or maybe it's not excitement. Maybe it's another feeling there.
Yeah, which we'll get to. So you can share in the chat or questions area if you want.
And there's some other ones here. So is there anything that maybe gave you a confidence boost? Something that was like, oh, yeah, I feel that way. And then let's see, another question. What was most scary? Or you can just ask us your own questions. It looks like we have a question coming in here. So Tom asked, how important is it to bring it up to code?
Well, you know, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but we do anyway.
We do every day.
Right. Now, there's a difference between discipline and obsession. The discipline is basically being put together in a presentable way to the world, to humanity, so that it does not erode your brand. And that starts with your personal brand, and it actually starts on the inside with self-love, self-worth. This is why we talk about if you're an entrepreneur and you've suffered from mental illnesses or childhood trauma, you got to get that stuff dealt with and worked on because it is going to come out in your brand in some way. The obsession is constantly tweaking with the cover design of your brand, constantly messing with it because, and usually that's a sign of insecurity. It's a sign that you really are not all that confident in your brand, or it's a little bit of laziness to be obsessive about your outside brand as well, in the sense that it's always easy to go in, well, I'm going to change the header image on my website. Well, that's not really work. That's not really an action. That's just busy work. To this direct point, Tom, is that if you don't do it, no one's going to do it for you. And that's where the discipline comes in. And you can, you know, this idea of build it and they will come, or my work is good enough, it doesn't need packaging. None of that's true. Even bacon's packaged. It's just packaged with a little window so you can see the bacon, but it's still packaged. Mm-hmm. What was the next question?
So the next, actually, was just a comment that Victoria is most inspired by, if you build your career by saying yes, you build your brand by saying no.
Yeah.
Wow, that was convicting.
Thank you, Victoria.
Good. I'm glad that that resonated with you. So any other questions that we can answer? Here we go. Emily and Justin, I love to question provide, and with a fractured wrist, typing is not my strong suit. Thank you, Kate, for joining us. One question that we get all the time is kind of where do I start? And I know we kind of rolled through a lot of places to start, but Justin, if you had to say, what's one thing that someone could do today that would help to turn that passion into a brand?
I think you got to start expressing it. Mm-hmm. I think that most of the time, unless some opportunity just is foisted upon us, we don't really ever express our passion. Mm-hmm. You think of Carrie Underwood, who is one of, I think, the highest selling artist from American Idol winners, and a legit singer. Mm-hmm. She was a country girl. She sang like in church and at maybe local establishments. Mm-hmm. American Idol comes along and she has the gumption to audition, and then she performs. We don't get a lot of audition moments unless we create them. Mm. So I think that's the thing, is you just start expressing. Don't worry about monetizing it yet. Yes. If it's a side gig, just start expressing it or sharing it, whether it's poetry. Maybe you have a new product that you want to design, or software product you want to design, or maybe you're a visual artist. Whatever it is, start sharing it.
Yeah, and I would also say in that space of start sharing it, the goal is not to see really right at first how other people react. I would say for a little bit, it's okay to put blinders on and just go through the practice of sharing. Because if you open up a little bit too soon to really leaning into people's reactions and writing them down, you're going to become too focused on the external. And the practice here is an internal one of sharing and putting out to the outside world.
The other piece I would say, and we'll wrap, is that if you are waiting for the fear to go away to act, you will never act.
No.
And it will come and it will go, and some days you'll be terrified, and some days you'll be overly confident. But if this is your side gig, or maybe you have a full-time gig that allows you to have some flexibility for not just a side gig, but a secondary gig that's bigger, don't wait to not be afraid. In fact, fear is evidence that you need to move forward.
Right.
When we meet entrepreneurs that are fully confident on the surface of their idea or their product, they're like, man, that's somebody just waiting to get bitten, because it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We have a few options for you to continue to engage with us. We invite you to visit our website and to subscribe to our newsletter and follow our peruse our pithy posts. Nice little alliteration there.
That's some of my greatest copy I've ever written.
I think it's on our website.
Is it really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Follow us, and then we are offering a brand spanking new here, Becoming a Brand virtual course that begins next week, and it's an 8-week course where we walk you through the practices of becoming a brand. And there are assignments, and it's a kind of get your hands dirty, and then let's dive in, let's discuss each of these. And along the way, you're really going to learn how to express yourself as a brand in the world, and you'll know what to do next, and you'll know how to talk about your brand. And we invite you to join us for that. It's
a deeper dive into what we shared with you today.
Yeah.
It's designed really for side gig people, creatives in particular. Maybe you want to do some action to see if you're ready to be an entrepreneur. Well, but the course is a great way to do that, because it's virtual, it's spread out over an 8-week period, it's relatively low cost, and you can go to rootandriver.com and see where to sign up.
Or our social media feeds have information about becoming a brand. There's a page that's dedicated to it as well.
And you can always email us. You'll get an email from us with the recording. And you can always email us if you have more questions about the course.
Yeah,
we'd love to have you.
If you have questions about anything we presented today, it's Emily@rootandriver.com or Justin@rootandriver.com, or just humans@rootandriver.com.
It all comes to us.
Yeah, it all comes to us. So thank you so much, and we're going to donate back a few minutes of your time. And we look forward to talking with you again.
Go out and have an awesome day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
That's true.